What's up, guys? Welcome. Let's talk about the HTML5 Canvas and how to draw images onto the canvas. So here's what we're going to be building today. You can see it right here. So it's this image here. So we've got this PNG file. All right. So notice it's 418 by 418. It's got some transparency here. And then here's the main image. And what we're going to do is we're going to see how can we draw that image to the screen. You can see we've scaled it down. We're rotating it. You can also see we've got the spiral. We've sampled the eye on the left-hand side of the image. Sampled it, we copied it. We're drawing multiple copies of it. We're scaling them down. We're rotating. We're translating. So we're going to see how to do all that stuff. So my notes and the start code are linked in the video description. So they're right here. So the start code is something you could type in 5 seconds, but here it is if you want to go ahead and copy it from here. It's just a basic canvas tag. We've also got an image file. You can use your own image file. You can use mine. That's fine. And then real quick for the notes, so for this video, I'm assuming you know some HTML, you know a little bit of JavaScript, and you probably have heard of the Canvas tag, or maybe you've used it a little bit in the Canvas API. So what's the Canvas API? So we get this Canvas tag. It's an element. It's a rectangle on the screen, and we can do procedural drawing with JavaScript right into it. So what can we draw? Well, we can draw images, obviously. We can draw lines and rectangles and arcs and circles and all kinds of stuff. We can draw bitmapped images. We could draw SVG images. We could get a frame from a video element, things like that. We could do image or video processing. So there's all kinds of stuff we can do with that. And to do that, we're going to use the context.drawImage method. All right. So that method, once again, you can use it to draw the whole image, or you can use it to draw just part of the image. It's up to you. Now, one big thing with images is before you can draw it, the browser actually has to have loaded it into computer memory, right? And if you don't do that, if you try to use JavaScript to draw the image before it's loaded, you won't get a out loud error message, but your code just won't work. So we want to talk about how to fix that. So we call that preloading. We need to preload the image before we can draw it. And then in this video, I'm just going to cover how to preload one thing, but in a future video, I'll show you how to preload multiple images. And then I've got some links down here we may shortly. So, okay, so let's dive into it. So if we head to, here's my file. So I've got a folder. You can name it whatever. There's my HTML file, and there's my images folder, and then there's image file, right? And then let's jump into it here. I'm in Visual Studio Code. There's my setup over there on the left. I'm going to be editing draw image file, and then over on the right, there it is right there. Okay, let's get to writing code then. All right, so I'm in Visual Studio Code, so I'll go ahead and hide that panel, and I can use Emmet. Just type in DOC. That gives me a nice template for an HTML page. I'm going to call this draw image demo. Let's go ahead and put a canvas tag in here. And we'll go ahead and set the width and the height to 600. Look over here. We can't see it in the window, but we can see it here. If we mouse over in the inspector, we can see it's definitely there. So let's write some code real quick, some styles. CSS here. Canvas tag. Give it a black border real quick here. So there it is. There's the black border. Okay. So it definitely shows up in the page, looking good. All right, so we've got a canvas element. Now let's write some code to manipulate it. So to do that, that would help if I finish my canvas tag. Make sure you finish your canvas tag. Let's write a script tag. So I'm putting my script tag at the bottom of the page so that the page actually loads, okay, before the script tag executes. So if I don't put my script tag, if I put my script tag someplace else, the canvas might not be loaded. But if I put it at the bottom of the page, the canvas is. Therefore, when I write canvas code, nothing will. All right, so we're going to start with a canvas drawing context object. So what is that? Well, we'll talk about that in a second, what it does, but let's talk about where we get it from. So we're going to get it from the canvas element. So we're going to say query selector canvas. So it gives us a reference to the canvas. And then we're going to say get context and give us the 2D context. There's a 3D context for WebGL, but we're not doing that. We're doing the 2D drawing API. So there's our canvas drawing context, and let's just console.log it out so we can see what it is. Head back here. All right, there it is. Okay, canvas rendering context 2D. So I've logged that out. What is that? So let's hit the triangle. So you can see it's got a bunch of properties, and it's got some methods hiding down here. So what are these? Well, this is the entire canvas drawing API. So first of all, there's properties of the drawing context, things like fill fill style, what's the color when you fill things? What's the stroke style is, what's the color when you do lines around paths? The text alignment, font property, all that kind of stuff. So this is showing all the defaults for these various properties. And then down here, we've got all the methods. So you can see things like begin, begin path, close path, draw image. We'll use that today. Fill rect, we'll use that today. So that's the whole drawing API. So if you go back to my notes, you'll see that I have links to that. So here's what get context does. If we want to learn how to use fill rect, we can right click on here. There's fill rect method, XY width height. If we want to learn how to use draw image, go here. It'll show us what we need for draw image. So that's the one we're going to be using here in a little bit. But anyway, this context object is the entire API. So we're going to do everything through the CTX variable. So actually, let's go ahead and grab, these are the 3 different forms of draw image. The first form, is here's the image. Where do we want to draw it? X and Y. The second form is, do we want to scale it? So here's the X and Y, and then what's the width and height? And D stands for destination, meaning when we're drawing on the canvas, where do we want to draw it on the canvas? How big do we want it to be? And then the last form of draw image is we have the image, and then we have 4 parameters where we define where we want to draw from on the image. So where do we want to start drawing from, and how wide and how high do we want that rectangle to be? And then finally, where do we want to put it on the screen, on the canvas, and then how big do we want that rectangle to be? That's what the last 4 are. So we'll do all 3 of these. So let's just go copy these so we can put them in our notes. All right, so we're good to go there. Let's get rid of that. So I'm going to write a function called draw image. All right, I'm going to make it an arrow function. So const draw image. And it's going to have a image parameter, img as well call it. And I'm going to need to call it, right, obviously. I don't have an image yet, so I won't pass anything in. And then these are for later. Comment. All right, so to start, let's draw a rectangle, actually, just for a sanity check here. So to do that, I've got a context object already. So first off, I want to say, what color do I want the rectangle to be? I'll set the fill style of the rectangle to yellow. So for fill style, you can use any legal CSS color. So here I'm going to use the yellow keyword, but I can also use the RGB constructor or the HSB constructor, whatever I want to. Then I'm going to do context.fillRect, which is going to fill this rectangle with the current fill style. So you can see it's XY width height. So we'll just do 0, 0. I could do 500, 500, right? Save it. And I should see over here. Yep, there it is. I'm going to go ahead and close that window. So here I've drawn it from here's 0, 0, and here's 500, 500. So it almost fits the canvas, but not quite. So I can actually change that to 600, 600, and that fills the canvas. Okay, so that's my background. Great. So let's go ahead and do draw image. So what draw image is going to look like? It's going to be ctx.drawImage. Who would have thought? And I'm going to draw. The first thing I need to do is give it the image. So it's going to be a parameter named img. And then I just say where I want to put it. So I'll say draw image at 0, 0. Now I don't have an image, so nothing's happening. So I need to, before I call draw image, I need to actually have an image loaded in. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to comment out my current call to draw image. And then I'll start, I need to make a new image. So to make a new image, I'm going to say const tiger, actually it'll be tiger URL, okay? So that's where is this image located. So it's in images/tiger.png. So if you used a different image or put it in a different place, you'll have to change this. Then I'm just going to make a new image. So I'll just say const tiger image equals new image, all right? Then I'm going to say tiger image dot src equals tiger URL. Right? And then that's cool. Okay, so I created this image, but how do I know it's loaded? Well, I don't know it's loaded, but there's, yet it's not loaded yet. So let's write some code that says, hey, when it's loaded, let me know. So I'm going to say tiger image dot onload equals, and I'll give it a empty arrow function here. So there's my empty arrow function. And inside that empty arrow function, we'll go ahead and say, hey, let's call draw image. So you can see it's, drawing the image, but now let's pass in tiger image. Right? So now what happens is when it's loaded, when the image is actually loaded in, it's going to call the draw image method, and It's going to pass in the tiger image. Okay, so let's move on to our second form of draw image. So we did the first one. Let's do the second one. So for the second one, I'm just going to copy this line, comment out the old one, and I want to do this one here. So draw image, destination X, destination Y, where do I want to draw it? And then I want to say, hey, how wide and how high do I want it to be? So I'm going to scale it. So here, in this case, I'm going to make it 240 by 240. So if I type in 240 by 240, you can see it's scaled it to 240 width, 240 height. If I don't, it's up to me to preserve the aspect ratio. So if I put in like 240 by 140, it's actually going to squash it. So it's up to me to handle that. The square image, so it's pretty easy to calculate the aspect ratio. So cool. So that's pretty easy to do. And then of course I can move it around on the screen if I want to. So I could try to put it in the center. Whoops, the center of the screen, which is 300, 300. There we are. Put it in the center of the screen, or did I? I didn't really put it in the center of the screen because why? Well, remember these images are drawn from their left-hand corner. So if we put it at 0, 0, it's here. Okay, that's the upper left-hand corner of the image. Remember, it has a lot of transparency. So if I say, hey, make the X equal to 300, 300, that's where it's going to start 0, 0. So it's not really going to be centered. So how about I center an image like this, right? That's a good question. So kind of the easy way is take a trick. So this is 240 by 240. So if I just subtract half of that, 120 and 120, I go X 180, Y 180, then I will have drawn it in the center of the screen. So that's good. That works. All right. So so let's go ahead and what we'd like to do is rotate this image. Hey, how do I get it to rotate, animate like that? So let's go ahead and try out how to do that. So to do that, I'm going to need to do rotations. All right. So I have that linked in our notes. We go look here. I've got rotate selected right here. So if I go drawing context, rotate, here it is, context, rotate method. So it takes an angle. The angle is going to be in radians. So radians, math.pi radians is 180 degrees. It's 3.1415. So 2 pi is 360 degrees. So 1 radian, if you rotated 1 radian, that would be 180 divided by 3, so about 60 degrees. So 1 radian is roughly 60. So that's why don't we try to rotate that and see what that'll look like. Now there's one gotcha with the rotation. When you rotate things, it's kind of confusing. You're not rotating the object that you're planning to draw. You're actually rotating the entire canvas, and then any drawing you do is reflects that rotation of the entire canvas. So if that doesn't make any sense, it will in a second. So we'll show you what we get. So our first attempt at this is going to be a little ugly. So let's go ahead and we do this before we draw the object. So we're going to say ctx.rotate. All right. So once again, it wants radians. I'll say 1 radian, about 60 degrees, and I'll try that. And what do I get? Oh, well, you can see. Okay, let's make it 0.5. Let's make it 0.5 radians. So this should be 30 degrees. All right, there it is, 30 degrees. So you can see it should be over here, right? Rotated, but what happened? What's going on? Well, when we rotated 30 degrees, we actually rotated the entire canvas, right? So basically, the canvas is now rotated like that. And then we moved down, right? 180, 180, right? Which is roughly here. And then we started drawing. So it's not giving us the effect we want. We want to rotate it around the center. So we don't want to rotate the entire canvas, right? So that's when we say we're rotating the entire canvas, that's the kind of effect we get, right? And if we rotated it, the canvas, well, minus 0.5, right? Yeah, there we go. There's minus 0.5. So there we've rotated it minus 0.5 and started drawing. So it's not doing what we expect it to do. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to change how we're going to draw things. So I'm going to go back and put this thing at 0, 0. Okay. 240, 240. So there it is. I'm going to, let's just change my rotation to 0.2. All right. So something smaller. There it is. Okay. So it's rotated a little bit. So I got it 0, 0 and I've rotated a little bit. So how do we get it to rotate around the center? Well, what I need to do is before I rotate, I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to say ctx.translate. So this is what this is going to do. Translate actually picks up the drawing context and moves it. And I'm going to say, I want you to translate to the middle of the screen. All right. 300, 300. Let's forget about the rotation here. And then I want you to draw the image. All right. So I'm picking up the 0, 0 and moving it over and moving it down. So it's right here. Let's see if there's a good display of that or good example of that here. So translate. Yeah, ctx.translate. Sure. So translate moves the origin X and Y. So we're going to say, hey, move the origin over and down. Okay. So So there it is. Anyway, so the problem is, so 0, 0 has actually been moved to the middle of the screen. And then remember, the problem with this guy is he's got all this white space and we're drawing him from the upper left-hand corner. So how do I get him to actually draw around the actual center point like I want to? Well, I'm going to go here and say minus 120 and minus 120. So I'm going to use the half width, half height trick. And look at that. Now he's in the middle of the screen. And now, so I've translated the 0, 0 and I draw him. He's in the middle of the screen. If I undo the rotate, you can see, and actually let's go back to 1 radian there. There it is. He's actually pivoting around his center point. So that's what I wanted to happen. All right. So let's go ahead and animate that real quick. Okay, so what we'll need is a variable to keep track of the rotation, which we'll name rotation. Set it to 0. We'll use that. We'll replace that hard-coded 1 with the rotation. So there we go. Rotation equals 0. There it is. Okay, so it's in the center of the screen. It's unrotated. So that looks good. All right, so now we need to periodically update the rotation value. So to do that, we're going to use window.setTimeout. Just type set timeout. So set timeout will, what we can do is we can schedule a, in this case it says handler. So in that case, it's a function. A function we want to be called in a specified amount of time. So the function we want to be called, actually I'll just throw in a arrow function for now, an empty arrow function. And inside that arrow function, I'll say console.log tick. Okay. This is just some code to test do a sanity check. And then after that, I'm going to say, hey, let's the delay. So the first argument is what the code we want called. The second argument is the delay. So the delay will be 1,000 milliseconds. So this is going to call itself in 1,000 milliseconds. Tick. Okay. So this is only getting called once. So if we go look in the console, if I just reload the page, we wait a second, and then it calls tick. Okay. And if I reload the page, wait a second, tick. Okay. So that's not terribly useful. So, but you can see it took a second. So what do we want to do instead? Well, what we want to do instead is we actually want to call drawImage. All right. And you'll notice that drawImage is drawing that yellow background, which we'll go ahead and block out, overwrite everything that was there before, and then it's going to draw the tiger. So I'll go say, okay, so I'm going to say every second call drawImage. Now you're going to get some interesting effects here, like, what's going on here? So that's what we want to happen. And before we call drawImage, we want to, and we'll just fix that mess in a second. We want to increment rotation. So we're going to say rotation. What do we want you to go up by? Plus equals, if we did 0.1 radians, okay. Actually, we could do 1 radian. Let's do 1 radian every second. Okay, so what will that do? Rotation goes up by 1 radian every second, then called drawImage. So what's that going to do for us? Oh, rotation should be a let variable. Sorry about that. We're incrementing rotation. All right. Anyway, something's going wrong. You can see the second one's getting rotated. The third one's getting rotated. So something strange is going on. So what's going on here is whenever you use translate and rotate, whenever you use these transformation methods, they will continue to accumulate even between your frames. So that means this is continuing to rotate 1 radian every time, every second. It's going to rotate 1 radian every second and draw the tiger. So that's not giving us the effects we want. So what we want to do is before we do any translates or rotations, we're actually going to do a context.save. So there's this concept of the drawing state stack, which stores things like your state variables, like your fill style and your stroke style. It also stores any transformations you've done. So, so what we're going to do is we're going to save the default drawing state stack. So that's no translations, no rotations. We're going to do our changes to translate and rotate. We're going to draw our image, and then we're going to go down here and we're going to say ctx.restore. All right. So all that does is just put the drawing state stack back to where it's supposed to be. Let's see if that's going to give us more of what we want there, right? So, oh, except you got to spell restore right. So last time here, so every second, now you can see, wow, look at that, it's working. So every second, it's rotating this thing 1 radian, okay? So it's going to set timeout. So what happens with this set timeout is this is scheduled at the beginning of the function call. It's going to call. It says, okay, in 1 second, go ahead and call drawImage. Then this code runs, and then a second later, drawImage gets called again. It schedules another call to set timeout. Then it draws its frame and so on. Okay. So anyway, a 1 millisecond or 1 second delay is kind of boring. Let's do a 30 frames per second thing. So 1,000 milliseconds divided by 30 means the delay will be 30 frames per second. So there, that's more like 30 frames a second. So now it's getting animated kind of the way we expect to, although it's getting animated very quickly. So for rotation, what do we want to increase the rotation by? So let's go ahead and change this up. So math.pi times 2 is 360 degrees. Okay. So if I do that, it's actually rotating 360 degrees. We can't see that every time. We can't see anything happening. So what we want to do instead is let's divide that by, if we divided that by 100, then that means every frame it's rotating 3.6 degrees. You can see now it's moving at a pretty slow pace. Okay. So if we divided that by 60, okay, we can see it's rotating a little more than that. And actually it's going to rotate 1/60th of a circle every frame. So that means it takes 2 seconds to rotate around one time. And lastly, let's just change it to over 30 as well. So it's going to rotate 1/30th of a circle every 30th of a second. So it means it's going to rotate one complete circle every second. So that looks pretty good right there. Okay. So that's our rotation functioning there. And once again, you can play with these values to get a little bit different effect if you want to. I think I'll leave it at that. Okay, let's do the last part of this, which is drawing with the third variation of drawImage, the one that just samples from part of the image. Let's go ahead and do that. So that's going to look like this: context.drawImage. Give it an image, and then we're going to give it 4 parameters that say where we're going to draw from and how much, and 4 parameters that say we're going to draw to and how much. All right. So source X, source Y, source width, source height. Then where do we want to put it? So let's take a look at the original image. So here's the original image. Obviously, this upper left corner is 0, 0. So what we want to do is sample somewhere over here, right? Grab a rectangle that is equivalent to that eye, and then we want to draw it on the screen. Let's go ahead. I've got some numbers I worked out. So what is it? So the source X is 225. By the way, the image is IMG. Source X is 225. The source Y is 100. So over 225, down 100, roughly right about there. The width is going to be 50 by 30. Gets me what I want to get. So that's going to give me a rectangle right there. And then where do I want to put it? So in this case, let's just put it at 0, 0. And we're going to scale it up. We're going to do 100. We're going to do 60. We're going to double it up. So take a look. And there it is. Yeah, so there's our image. That's that original eye right there. We scaled it up in size. And we're drawing it there. It's a little bit blurry, but that's okay for our purposes. So great. So let's write a quick little loop here. So let I, 0, I is less than 5, I plus plus. And we'll go ahead and draw this image a few times. And we're going to make it, we're going to draw it at XY. So let's draw it at I times 110. Okay. So X is equal to I times 110. So that should tile them across the top. Okay. Remember, that's destination X right there, DX. And thing went wrong with my preview. So there we go. Close that one up. All I did was just copy the URL over again to open the page. Okay. So anyway, there's my 5 samples that I right there copied over. Okay. So we're going to use a loop. All right, so what we want to create is this spiral effect here, right? Where we want to do, this is actually 55 copies. And what we're doing here is we're actually using the translate, rotate, and scale thing again. Translating and rotating a little bit, drawing the image, and then continuing that process as we spiral in. So let's go ahead and do that. And to save time, I'll do a quick copy paste. But let's see. But one thing we don't want to forget is, because we're going to be doing this drawing, we're going to be using translate and rotate. Let's make sure we do our context.save and then our context.restore. Okay. So that means we can go ahead and make a bunch of changes. I'm just going to delete this for now. We're going to make a bunch of changes in here with translating, rotating, scaling, and all that. And those will all get thrown away when the restore is hit. So like I said, I think I'll just copy paste and walk through what the code's doing. Okay. Sure it works. All right. So here we go. And I'm going to stop that rotation for now because that's distracting. So here's the code. And did it work? Yes, it did. So here's our version here. The rotation is not moving. So what is this code doing? So we're putting this right after our simple draw image. This is drawing the single tiger image. So we're going to save, we're going to restore, we're going to translate, we're going to pick up 0, 0 and move over 150 and down 165. So that puts us right there. And then we're going to loop through 55 times. We're going to draw the image at negative 50, negative 50. Okay, we're going to make it 100 by 60. And then what we do each time is we're going to translate a little bit. So we're going to translate, let's just translate by 110 and see what the difference is. We're going to translate by 110, okay? Every time we go, we're going to move over to the right 110. Then we're going to rotate, okay, 36 degrees, right? And then we're going to scale things down slightly. You can see it's scaling down. And so we're going to draw, translate, rotate, scale, and then we'll draw again, translate, rotate, scale. And these will keep accumulating So it'll keep accumulating, and we'll get this spiral action going here. So I put in that minus I times 2 to just kind of tighten things up, because I'm making these things smaller. I want to move them a little bit less as I'm translating. So whoops, so there we go. So that's making it. If I wanted to, if I did minus I times 3, that would tighten them up even. Then they kind of overlap too much. I think I times 2 is a good. All right. So that's giving me that spiral effect there. And then when I'm all set and I'm scaling down, and these all accumulate, and then when my loop is done, I'm going to restore. So I'm going to get the translation, rotation, and scaling matrices back to the default, the identity matrix. So that's what's going on there. Okay, so that's good. So let's do a couple things. Let's get the rotation going again. You might notice this is slightly different than our starting one. So this is our example here. Okay, so our example, notice the big tiger head is drawn on top, and this one is drawn behind. Why is that? Well, Canvas uses what's called the painter's model. So newer graphics are drawn on top of older graphics. So this little block here is our single tiger in the middle. Okay, so all you need to do is just cut that, and I'll just put here, I'll put a comment in spiral. Then I'll go down here and put in another comment, rotating tiger. Okay, paste that in, and there he is. Okay, so that's all the code right there. It's working. So we're good to go. All right, so we'll see you on the next video.